A Somaliland hospital struggles to save people malnourished from a brutal drought. Health workers prepared to launch a massive polio vaccination drive across West and Central Africa. And why London's street style is launching trends worldwide. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now tonight we begin with the pain and suffering of the people in East Africa. In northwest Somalia, the breakaway Republic of Somaliland is grappling with a severe drought as medical workers struggle to aid people left weakened by malnourishment and hunger. VOA's Abdulaziz Osman filed this TV report from Erigavo, the capital of Sanag region. Rob Raphael narrates his report.
This 70-year-old hospital is operating beyond full capacity to treat people affected by the drought. And it's the only hospital in Somaliland's Sanag region. The drought has left tens of thousands of children acutely malnourished. In desperate need of treatment, they are checked as they lie on the beds in the stabilization center ward. The hospital's director says most of the admitted children come from rural areas.
The drought forced most pastoralists to move from one area into another. Some came to the cities, but most of the malnourished children admitted here are from the rural area.
Adiris Salah, a 14-month-old boy, weighed just over 6 kilograms when he was brought to the hospital from the Durar IDP camp. His mother, fighting back tears, says her son was suffering from severe diarrhea and malnutrition. His doctor said Salah is improving and now weighs 7.2 kilograms.
He was very weak when he was referred here. His weight and height were too low. We put him in the stabilization center as he was in the severely malnourished cafeteria. The initial phase, he couldn't take the feeding or the milk, so we inserted the NG tube to increase his feeding. Now, he still has the NG tube.
Medical officials say some families in the drought-stricken area cannot afford to bring their children to local medical centers, but doctors encourage parents to make the trip if they can.
In rural areas, sometimes families with malnourished children are not able to bring them to hospitals. So, for example, if a mother has 10 kids and 5 of them are malnourished, we beg her to bring the sick children to a hospital.
The United Nations has said more than 6 million people across Somalia and Somaliland are in need of help due to the extended drought, which shows no sign of ending. For Abdulaziz Osman, I'm Robert Raphael, VOA News.
Well, now for more on the drought in Somaliland, VOA reporter, Somali service reporter Abdulaziz Osman joins us via Skype from Hargeisa in Somaliland. First, fantastic report there. Now, Abdulaziz, first give us a sense of how much help are people in Somaliland receiving after so many calls being made internationally?
We cannot say that the people affected by the drought is receiving what they needed. We have been actually traveling in the eastern part of Somaliland, where the drought is actually killing not only livestock, also making young children malnourished. Since or during my trip in that part of the region, I haven't seen any aid being delivered to the people. So there are actually appeals and after appeals, either from the Somaliland government, from the communities or Somalis all around to help these people, but nothing significant has been delivered to the people affected by the drought.
Now, what is the government itself saying in terms of its capacity, not only to provide any form of food, but also health services, particularly to this kind of children that we've seen who are malnourished?
I think the government is doing its best. It's doing what it can, but the government is very weak, and it has very limited capacity to cope with the scale of this crisis. The hospital that I visited and that you saw in that piece is in Sanag region, and that hospital is run by the UNICEF and other aid agents. So there is little that the government actually is delivering or helping to those people affected by the drought. in the meantime, it's doing what it can. It actually contributed or actually already paid more than $1 million in the drought efforts. But I mean, that's very little when it comes to the need that people in that region, it does not cope or it does not cover the drought crisis in that part of the region.
So limited capacity there. Tell us a little more about the seasons. Now we hear there is rainfall in parts of Somaliland. Is that helping at all?
In the eastern part where I have been traveling for the last 6 days, there's no report that it's rained. But in the western side of Somaliland, the rain has started. And when I was coming to Hargeisa from my trip 2 nights ago, I actually was that close to away by the floods that were coming from the mountains. So in this part of Somaliland, the western side, Hargeisa and the suburb, the rain actually is coming. But on the eastern side, the most hard-hit drought area, the rain is still not there, and people really are in desperate situation and they need the rain right now.
Indeed, as we can see, dire situation there. We look forward to more of your reports. Abdulaziz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent.
That's VOA Somali service reporter Abdulaziz Osman reporting live via Skype from Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland. Now, with the warmer weather arriving in the north, more and more Africans are trying to reach the European Union for work and to escape conflict at home. Human traffickers continue to take advantage of the migrants' dire situation by packing scores of people in flimsy boats where they may be abandoned on the high seas. VOA's senior analyst Jeffrey Young has details.
They're out in the water, adrift and alone, abandoned by human traffickers who took them to the Libyan coast and then out to the Mediterranean Sea. Under the fierce sun and under storm clouds, thousands of sub-Saharan Africans bob in little inflatable boats, hoping for rescue and a better life in the European Union. For some, death happens before rescue. The UN's International Organization for Migration says that as of mid-March, at least 481 people have perished in the Mediterranean this year, a massive increase from the 101 fatalities seen by this time in 2016. The traffickers who packed the boats with no regard for human safety are driving this death toll, according via Skype to the IOM's Joel Millman.
We think that the people who move human cargo like this are dangerously overloading the boats they have and actually setting them off in very bad conditions. We've even heard of cases of shootings on the coast with migrants who refused to get on the boats because they deemed them unsafe. But the traffickers seem more ruthless than we remember, and they're pushing them out into sea anyway.
These Africans traveled hundreds of kilometers to reach the Libyan coast, many led by traffickers who often brutalize them on the way to the sea. Their stories are recounted via Skype by NGO Médecins Sans Frontières Rescue Director Edward Taylor.
We are hearing stories of extortion. We're still hearing stories of sexual violence and general lawlessness inside of Libya, I think, and this is concurrent from most of the stories I hear on board Aquarius.
Aquarius is the name of one of Médecins Sans Frontières rescue ships in the Mediterranean. It cruises the path between Libya and Sicily, looking for boats packed with migrants. Aboard the Aquarius, the condition of many of those rescued is described via Skype by MSF Dr. Connor Kenny.
Many of the people that we do rescue are dehydrated, they're hypothermic, they're exhausted. Many others suffer from fuel burns, so the mixture of gasoline and seawater causes extensive injuries throughout their bodies. We also have many women on board who've also been the victims of sexual violence whilst in Libya, and a huge percentage of our male patients have been beaten whilst in Libya.
Along with NGOs such as MSF, there is a major EU military operation in the Mediterranean called Operation Sophia. It too searches for migrant boats. People are taken ashore in Sicily for processing and moved to facilities to await their asylum hearings. Operation Sophia is credited with saving thousands of people from death at sea. It also works with Libya's Coast Guard to interdict human traffickers when possible. Now that spring has arrived on the Mediterranean, the waters are calmer and more inviting for migrants to put to the sea. The IOM's Joel Millman says an even bigger wave of Libyan crossing attempts is expected this year compared to 2016.
Last year we had over 180,000 for the year, which was a considerable rise over 2015. So there's every reason to expect 2017 to be even greater than last year. What's alarming is the much more higher likelihood of death.
Floating in the Mediterranean far from home, Africans seeking opportunity, fleeing violence and famine, drifting despite the possibility of a deadly price. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Well, on the streets of the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital on Tuesday, demonstrators, some burning tires at Kinshasa crossroads, protested Catholic bishops' withdrawal from their role as mediators between the government and the opposition in talks aimed at paving the way for delayed elections this year. A Congo's Conference of Catholic Bishops helped negotiate a December 31st deal aimed at avoiding a political crisis by ensuring an election this year to elect President Joseph Kabila's successor. Kabila's mandate ran out in December, but polls were not held due to what the government says were budgetary constraints. Another move sparked violent protests at the end of last year, in which security forces killed at least 40 people. While veteran South African anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Kathrada, who was sentenced to life imprisonment alongside Nelson Mandela, died on Tuesday at 87. Kathrada was one of the most senior African National Congress leaders to criticize Jacob Zuma as allegations of government corruption mounted. Affectionately known as Uncle Kathy, the liberation struggle stalwart who spent 26 years in prison under the apartheid government, was hospitalized in Johannesburg this month after surgery to relieve blood clotting on the brain. Kathrada's foundation says his condition had deteriorated rapidly, with pneumonia affecting both lungs. President Jacob Zuma says Kathrada will be honored at an official state funeral, and flags at government offices would fly at half-staff until then. Well, the U.S. military is looking at more than 700 separate video feeds covering 10 days of airstrikes in Mosul to determine whether reports that counter-Islamic State coalition strikes killed as many as 100 civilians in Mosul are credible. Now, the Pentagon says an initial review showed coalition warplanes conducted strikes on March 17th at the location corresponding to allegations of civilian casualties in western Mosul's old city. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis says the military is taking the reports very seriously.
There is no military force in the world that has proven more sensitive to civilian casualties. We are keenly aware that every battlefield where an enemy hides behind women and children is also a humanitarian field, and we go out of our way to always do everything humanly possible to reduce the loss of life or injury among innocent people. The same cannot be said for our adversaries.
Well, a Pentagon spokesman says those assessing the situation hope the video could provide clarity on reports of secondary explosions, which some news outlets have blamed on Islamic State improvised explosive devices. The Iraqi military is casting doubt on U.S. blame for the March 17th casualties, citing new evidence it says shows Islamic State fighters placed explosives on the site. More than 500,000 civilians are still believed to remain in Islamic State-held areas of Mosul, with many of them used by Islamic State extremists as human shields as Iraqi forces advance. Civilians, humanitarian aid groups and monitoring officials have warned about the possibility of increased civilian casualties because of an increasing demand for airstrikes and artillery. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We are also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Well, coming up, the UN launches a massive child immunization program across the continent. Stay with us.
News and notes. This is Living Better.
Want to live to be over age 90?
then just be a girl born in South Korea in 2030 and your chances are good. New research indicates that South Koreans top the list of countries where people will live the longest in the near future due to factors such as good childhood nutrition, low blood pressure, and low smoking rates. South Korea has become highly developed in public health, says Kim Chung-oh of the Yonsei University College of Medicine. And it is true, it is much easier for people to use medical care, he says. The study in the medical journal Lancet predicts life expectancy at birth for South Korean women will be 90.8 years in 2030 and just over 84 years for men. Other countries with the highest increases in health expectancy for women are Slovenia and Portugal, and Hungary for men. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lina Madur with news of a deadly outbreak of meningitis in West Africa. Hello, Lina.
Hello, Vincent. Nigerian officials say an outbreak of meningitis in several states of Nigeria has killed at least 140 people. The Abuja Center for Disease Control says meningitis has been reported over the last week in 6 states and has so far infected more than 1,000 people. Meningitis causes an acute inflammation of the outer layers of the brain and spinal cord and can be prevented with vaccination. However, the Nigerian Ministry of Health says a new strain is now prevalent in Nigeria and requires a different type of vaccine. Nigeria lies on the meningitis belt, stretching from the Sahel region to the Horn of Africa, where outbreaks occur regularly. Today marks the final day of the 3-day campaign during which more than 116 million children have been vaccinated against polio across West and Central Africa in a drive to contain an outbreak of the disease in conflict-stricken northeast Nigeria. Fighting between Boko Haram and the Nigerian army has caused a mass displacement, raising fears the polio outbreak could spread across borders and throughout the region. The polio virus, which invades the nervous system and can cause irreversible paralysis within hours, spreads rapidly among children, especially in unsanitary conditions in war-torn regions, refugee camps, and areas where healthcare is limited. After 2 years in which polio appeared to be beaten in Africa, Nigeria reported 4 cases last August, casting a shadow over global eradication hopes.
Last year in Nigeria, 4 children were reported with poliomyelitis for the first time in 2 years in Africa. And this is why it's so important to raise the population immunity across the African continent to finish with polio once for all. These vaccination campaigns constitute one of the largest synchronized campaigns in history. A total of 190,000 vaccinators will be fanning out in 13 countries, going door to door to vaccinate every single under 5 child. We need to synchronize the campaigns and vaccinate all of the children at the same time so that the virus has nowhere to hide and we can end polio for good in Africa.
And town criers, local guides, community leaders, and radio stations have been engaged to spread the word about the campaign and educate people about its importance. Now, doctors at a Chicago area hospital have successfully operated on a baby from Africa born with a parasitic twin and having 4 legs and 2 spines. VOA Browning's Benito reports the girl, known only as Dominique from Côte d'Ivoire, is recovering well from the delicate and groundbreaking surgery.
Baby Dominique was born with 4 legs and 2 spines. Her identical twin had failed to separate, leaving a large mass of legs and feet connected to her.
As if the twin, from the waist down, had been attached to the back of Dominique's neck. And there was a pelvis and bladder and functional legs that moved and feet coming out of the back of Dominique's neck.
The parasitic twin was causing 10-month-old Dominique's little heart and lungs to work overtime to support the equivalent of 2 bodies. The extra weight on her neck threw off her balance, impeding normal growth and development. The extra body parts were attached to Dominique's spinal cord and nervous system, making surgery to remove them delicate. So doctors at Advocate Children's Hospital in Park Ridge, Illinois, used scans and imaging to create a three-dimensional model of her two spines.
We had an enormous amount of specialized imaging that would allow us to identify her own native anatomy, the anatomy of the parasitic twin, and anticipate the problems we might see so that we could minimize any opportunity for a surprise during surgery.
Once in the operating room, Vicari says the critical part of the surgery involved the junction at the base of the two spines and the abnormal pelvis.
And once we had control of that, I think it was pretty clear to most people in the operating room that we were going to actually successfully be able to accomplish the surgery.
The surgery, performed March 8th, lasted 6 hours. Dominique was able to sit up the next day and was released for recovery 5 days later into the care of a local foster family. Doctors believe Dominique has a long and productive life ahead. She will be reunited with her family in Ivory Coast following her recovery period, most likely next month. Bronwyn Benito, VOA News, Washington.
Just incredible. Well, that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, Lenore, thank you very much. Now be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. What is it about London's street style that sets the city apart? We'll be right back.
He was prepared to die.
I know.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Front gardens are getting a makeover at the Ideal Home Show in London. Sitting areas nestled among herbs, vegetables, fruit and flowers make the best use of space in even the tightest areas. With summer around the corner and temperatures slowly rising, many people at the show are already starting to think about barbecue season. One popular exhibit features a range of outdoor furniture fitted with gas fires in the center of the table. It can even be used with a hot plate to cook food, so guests can sit around a table and fry pieces of meat, halloumi, or vegetables without the need for a smoky barbecue. While staying in London, what makes the city's streets chic so special? From the luxurious to the high street and the vintage to the recycled, the mix of looks is what makes the British city stand apart from fellow fashion capitals Milan, Paris, and New York. From colorful 1960s miniskirts to punk, London has championed groundbreaking styles and is particularly known for its creative talent. While Paris is still classical, elegant, and glamorous, London's anything-goes spirit continues to drive fashion trends. And that is what is trending today. Now, Somali groups in the U.S. state of Minnesota are trying to give young people a positive outlet to keep them away from negative influences such as drugs, violence, and extremism. One such effort is a basketball tournament that is bringing together several mosques from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Abdi Mahmoud attended the tournament and spoke with participants. VOA's Salem Solomon has the story.
Too often, young Somali Americans in Minnesota have made headlines for all the wrong reasons. A small number have fallen prey to the lure of drugs, gangs, and extremist ideology. But youth organizations in the state are trying to challenge all that. A group of 12 youth basketball organizations representing mosques around the Twin Cities held a tournament where young people were given the chance to build athletic skills and gain self-esteem. One of the players from the Al Rawda team, representing one of the mosques and won the tournament, explained why it was so important.
Today we have succeeded in winning the cup after beating at the finalist Ummatul Islam Club. We had worked very hard for this and we are so excited about it.
Minnesota is home to the largest Somali community in the U.S., with more than 20,000 living in the state out of a total of 80,000 across the country. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, about a dozen people have joined militant groups in Syria in recent years, and about 22 men have been lured to join Al-Shabaab in Somalia, dating back to 2007. Most recently, 9 Somali American men were accused of plotting to join ISIS. A Minnesota federal court handed them jail sentences. Programs like the basketball tournament are geared towards providing extracurricular activities to fend off negative influences. A local organization behind the tournament, For the Youth by the Youth, says the impact of the competition is felt far beyond the basketball courts.
The reason we started this program was when we saw what the youth are going through and how they were involved with gang fights among themselves. When we saw how they are suspected or labeled as extremists, we started to bring them together in order to prevent them from getting involved with drugs. We found a place where they can stay fit and stay busy and avoid negative influences.
One of the players, Abdullahi Bare, agrees that sport can be a unifying force for good.
This kind of tournament brings us together as brothers. We come together and we finish the games, we eat together and communicate as well.
The basketball tournament is an annual event in Minnesota that has been going on for 3 years. For Abdi Mahmoud, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today, and I'll be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. In the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Headlights are the 2 bright lights in front of a car. But what does a deer have to do with headlights?
I cannot believe you got to meet Hillary Clinton. That must have been so incredible.
I know. It was so incredible that I couldn't say anything. I was like a deer caught in headlights.
Well, that's understandable, but maybe next